So in Wednesday's first reading, we were introduced to a notion of Abraham kind of doubting God's promise of land. So again, this whole Genesis story, the threefold promise: land, descendants, and a worldwide blessing. Okay. Abraham questioned God's ability. How will I know, he says to God, how will I know that this land you have given me? And so God takes that promise and makes a covenant out of it, okay, in a very graphic and bloody detail with the killing of animals and the separating them, and then God, in as a symbol of a fire and smoke, walking through the animals to show, if I break my covenant with you, let what happened to these animals happen to me, okay? So we didn't get this yesterday because it was the feast of the nativity of John the Baptist. But as I said yesterday, it kind of fits really nicely that John the Baptist, his birth, is like the end chapter, okay, of the promises that God has made to Abraham. You know, John's like the last part of the story before the fulfillment, the completion in Jesus Christ. But yesterday's first reading, if we didn't have that feast day, this is very important for today's first reading, okay? Abraham is now questioning descendants, okay? Sarah's 90, I'm 100 years old, okay? How's this going to happen? So Abraham takes matters into his own hands. He takes one of his servants, okay, Haggai, all right, and with her conceives a son named Ishmael, okay. And now Abraham believes, okay, this is the fulfillment here. You know, this is, my name through Ishmael will be great, okay, and descendants through him. And God's like, no, you're taking matter into your own hands here, okay. I will come through on my promise. And that's very important for today's first reading, because in Genesis 17, we get the introduction of circumcision, okay, which becomes the sign of the covenant. Without knowing what happened in chapter 16, this would seem very odd and strange, but it's not. Okay, why? Well, this time, God now is going to require Abraham to step up his game and to put his trust in God. Abraham failed in chapter 16. He took matters into his own hands. But now God's saying, okay, now you're going to have to give something. Because in chapter 15, what happened, remember, God, to solemnize his promise, to make a covenant, he passed through the animal carcasses. He placed the burdens of the covenant on himself. And now in chapter 17, because of what Abraham did in chapter 16, Abraham has to give a part of himself now to this covenant arrangement. Okay, that's what circumcision, that's why it's the sign of the covenant. It's now man's portion of giving of himself over to God and to place his trust and fidelity of God. That's the whole mentality behind this. And so as we continue through the story, as God institutes this circumcision, the sign of the covenant, you know, he tells him that the son that he's going to be born, okay, Isaac, is going to mean God's laugh. Okay, that's what Isaac means. God's laugh. Notice in the first reading, Abraham and Sarah are kind of laughing. You know, how's this going to happen? You know, in a very kind of sarcastic type of way. But it's through Abraham, okay, where do we see Jesus in all this? It's through Abraham, through his descendants, through Isaac, that the Messiah is going to be born. Okay, Abraham didn't know this. Okay, the breeders in the Old Testament didn't know this, but we do now. Okay, this is why we still include it in our canon of sacred scripture. We know the whole story. It's through Abraham, Isaac, and then the future figures that we're going to see as we continue through Genesis, through which God is going to make the deliverance on his promise. Abraham's name's going to be great, and that last promise of the worldwide blessing is all going to come and start with the birth of Abraham's son, Isaac. May God bless you.